Good morning, good morning. For once, when I'm recording one of these videos, it's not blue skies and sun. So see, it does happen here in the Scottish borders, and usually in Scotland in general, particularly in the more rural areas, it does tend to be one extreme or the other. Either it's absolutely blindingly beautiful or it's absolutely awful. So we're somewhere in the middle. So it definitely does happen. Not that, well, no, there's a little sprinkling of blue sky in the distance. But anyway, not here to give you the weather report. We're out exploring with the hound. I can see a cat in the distance that he hasn't spotted yet. But luckily he's still in the lead. So inspiration for what I'm going to chat about today is always the people that I work with, and it actually comes from one of my other roles. Comes from my education role in medicine. So I'm a foundation program director, and day to day, part of my role as a consultant is looking after others in a professional capacity and an educational capacity as well. So there was a couple of examples this week from the doctors that I am responsible for looking after of difficulties generated by behaviours under stress. And by that I mean change in behaviour under stress. So even the loveliest person in the world can completely change personality when pressure is applied, and that can be really, really difficult to predict until you actually see it happen live or experience it happening live. And it can often be something that the person is completely blissfully unaware of as well. And this is definitely something I've encountered in the past. I was reflecting on the fact that when I was a fairly junior doctor, so I'd just gone from a slightly more supported role where literally my only job was just to get on with work in an A&E department, so just seeing the next patient and the next patient and the next patient and not really having to worry about what was going on in the wider department, to a role where I actually had to oversee what was going on in the wider department and give advice to other people about what they need to do, which is kind of my day-to-day role now, and it has been for many years. But that's quite a big leap, or I certainly found it quite a big leap. And I recognise now that a lot of what I was experiencing was just overwhelm, essentially. But I remember receiving a bit of feedback, and it was a real game-changing bit of feedback, was that I needed to be aware of my behaviours under stress, because I had a tendency to become a bit short and snappy. And just behave in a way that was very uncharacteristic for my baseline behaviour, which is generally, I remember in previous roles getting feedback in the same department in a similar job, getting feedback that I generally didn't seem to be in anything other than a good mood, which is quite unrealistic to maintain, I suppose. So behaviours under stress, I thought that'd be an interesting one to look at, because it came up a couple of times this week. And I say I'm certainly not a qualified psychologist. I'm trained coach, and I'm very, very interested in why we do what we do, how we manage our own mindset and ways of thinking, and how that affects the way we show up in day-to-day life. So that's really where my interest lies. And I am the kind of person that will go off and look things up and read up on things if I'm not sure. So I'm not guessing. Some of it's anecdote, some of it's hypothesis, and some of it's just from my own lived experience as well. So I think ultimately this comes down to that kind of primitive response that we get. So earlier iterations of humans, so many hundreds and thousands of years ago, our ancestors, really it was all about survival, and the parts of our brains that allow us to think rationally and logically and intelligently have evolved slowly and gradually over time, but we still have those older parts of our brain, those kind of primitive lizard parts, if you like. And I think that what happens is that, and this is what I've experienced as well, so when you're essentially in a fight or flight situation, so if you're under stress, we know that elsewhere in the body when you're under stress, the response, it's a chemical and physical response, means that you divert your blood supply away from so-called non-essential organs. So part of your fight or flight response is to allow you to escape, either fight or escape whatever life-threatening scenario is going on. And there is also, I think there's a couple of other psychological phenomena that have been added to that as well. So there's freeze as well. So freezing might be relevant, but you can kind of flip between, should I fight, should I run, should I stay still? And then there's another one that's been added fairly recently, which I learned about when I was studying somatic coaching, which is fawn. And I guess that's more of a modern one, where when we're under stress we will tend to just try and fit in. So I think that's probably a bit more of a modern phenomenon, and you might recognise that either in yourself or other people, where you're placed in a stressful scenario. You just feel like desperately like you just need to try and fit in to avoid conflict or something along those lines. So yeah, I think that's what happens really, and that's why the most intelligent person in the world can go from being the most intelligent person in the world to being a bit of a kind of blundering, floundering wreck when they're placed under stress, because the blood supply to the intelligent, rational parts of the brain is just completely hijacked, and you go to that kind of lizard, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, which probably isn't what you need, especially in a professional context. So the kind of scenarios that I might be faced with, at work would be medical emergency type stuff. And that was always my real anxiety and worry when I was a very junior doctor, was that I'm going to be placed in a scenario where I don't know what to do. And so really a lot of my early career was based around trying to make sure that I had the knowledge to manage whatever was put in front of me at any given time. And I think it's become easier as I've gotten more experienced, as you would imagine. So there's some things that are very rare, which I've still never seen, but I mentally prepare myself for these things. And I think having speaking generally outside of medicine, I think it's very, very helpful this is where having structure in your life is really, really helpful, and just having some ways where you can offload yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you're feeling stressed. It just allows you to try and dampen that response to stress, where you can feel like you're being diverted into that more primitive adrenaline type response rather than your usual rational response. So for me, that was always, when I'm dealing with a sick patient, then we will use certain ways of approaching certain situations, so you can absolutely fall back on these. And there can be a bit of pride kicks in sometimes, where people feel like, oh, why should I have to go through this step by step and talk about it out loud? Does that not mean, does that not look and sound bad? Am I not going to undermine the confidence of the people around me? But no, actually it's probably quite good, because then the people around you know exactly what you're thinking, and can actually be in a position to help you out as well. Which is really helpful. So I think having schema to fall back on, especially with common situations where I know I've reacted badly when X happened before, so how can I do better next time? So just even coming up with your own standardised operating procedure for how to approach common repeating stressful scenarios, because really that's what you need when you're overwhelmed. You need to be able to take a pause, so stop and go, I am overwhelmed. Take a breather if you can. Obviously it's a bit tricky in a medical emergency to kind of say, I'm just going to stop for a moment. So being able to kind of pause, take stock of what's going on, and then work your way through some kind of supporting scaffolding that's going to get you through what's going on. Building self-awareness is really important there as well. So certainly what I've been guilty of in the past, where I've reacted badly under stress, is that I then justify it afterwards. So as soon as that blood supply returns to the rational part of your brain, you start then going, well, that person did X or Y. And I think you just need to be like super honest with yourself and practice what Jocko Willink describes as extreme ownership. So which parts of that actually do you, because you're entirely in control of your own behaviour, so you must own 100% of your behaviour. Whether there was other factors at play is by the by, really, but you must have the self-awareness to look back at that and resist the urge to just be justifying your behaviour. So for every time that stuff like that happens, debrief yourself on it afterwards. Do it with someone else, and just go through what happened, why did it happen, what did you do well, because I can guarantee that there will have been positives from the way you've responded, but equally there may well be things that you think you could do better. And then in terms of what you can do better, how can you then build that into your SOP for future stressful circumstances? Although it's nice to think you can live a life without any stress, it's unrealistic to think that you'll be able to spend the rest of your life without experiencing any stress at all. And I think the key things to build then are self-awareness, having those foundations to be able to fall back on to get you through, and then just having a bit of a debrief afterwards. So that's a few thoughts from me on behaviours under stress. Comment, let me know what you think. Have you got any examples of things that help you when you're in times of stress? I'd be really curious to hear. See you next time.